Hey friends, and welcome back to Silverhawk Farm. If you're new here, my name is Bree, and we are back in my kitchen today for some cozy fall baking. If you missed it, we did some apple cider donuts just recently, and it really got me in the mood for all of the fall baking, in addition to the fact that it's fall and I love baking. So we're gonna be making some banana bread today because I have these lovely, extremely overripe bananas that are going to turn in the next day or two if I keep procrastinating baking with them. So we've got 3 overripe bananas. We're actually gonna be using a recipe from the Food Network, but I am going to be doing it without any special tools. I'm going to be creaming the butter and the sugar together by hand to show you that you can. So we're not going to use any special tools today. We're going to keep it simple. It's going to be super easy, and we're going to have some really delicious, super tasty banana bread. I'll be sure to include the link to the recipe down below if you want to make this, and I'm pretty sure you're going to want to. So the recipe calls for 1/2 cup of butter and 1 cup of granulated sugar, and then we're going to cream those together before adding any more ingredients. I have these already cut up because I did not remember to soften the butter, and so if you cut it up a couple hours before you're planning on baking with it, it's going to have more surface area, which means it's going to have an easier time softening in the time that you have. And then I'm just measuring out 1 cup of sugar. Whatever sugar you use is great. Mine's kind of like a coarse granulated sugar. I get it from Azure Standard. I like it. It's easy to buy in bulk. Right, so the thing about creaming butter, and the reason you usually do it using a stand mixer or a hand mixer, is because you really want it to get nice and incorporated, and really want that like fat combining with the sugar to get the texture you want in your baked good. So I'm starting out by just mixing this really well with a wooden spoon, and then once that starts to feel like it's not doing much, I'm gonna switch over to a fork, and I'm gonna get it to the same consistency that I would look for if I were using a stand mixer. I'm kind of smushing the butter with the flat edge of the spoon to get it as thin as possible because we want them to be really well mixed. All right, this is starting to kind of clump up and become one. So we're gonna switch over to the fork. And y'all, I'm not even using my scale today. Be proud of me. All right, so now I'm just gonna be mashing it like you would mashed potatoes actually. And get it really good. And one thing that you're gonna get with a mixer is kind of an airiness. So you're gonna wanna mix it more than is fun. We're gonna mix it quite a bit, which is why most of the time you don't do this by hand, but you can. And I want you to know that you can. You don't need any special tools to have delicious food. Now it's all starting to become sort of uniform here, which is good. And we're just gonna keep going. Now that it's all kind of uniform, I'm kind of breaking it up, kind of smushing, really just getting in there. Trying not to wear myself out too much. I'm so ready for all of the fall things. We had a lovely Halloween. Took the kids trick-or-treating. I do not like that it's getting dark early, both because it makes me sad, and because I hate the lighting that it makes for videos, but I don't want to not make cooking videos in the evenings because I do a lot of cooking in the evenings, so we're doing our best with what we have, even if we're a little darker than we'd like to be. Okay, this is really nice. This is actually really nice. So we've got what look like mashed potatoes. It's almost there. I'm gonna switch back to the spoon and just like smoosh it really well. We're almost kneading it like a dough now to get it as broken up as possible. And I am using a very big bowl, which I appreciate because I'm able to really get in there and fling it around without getting it out of the bowl. So definitely err on the side of a large bowl if you're gonna be hand mixing yourself. If you're using a stand mixer or a hand mixer, this will probably take about half the time, if not less than I am using to hand mix it. So if you've got the tools, use them. If you don't, make banana bread anyway. I'll show you how. The texture I'm looking for is for it to stop being so grainy. And it would be easier had I used a more fine sugar, like even like a table sugar like you'd get from the grocery store. Would probably break down a little easier than this kind of thick sugar that I'm using from Azure Standard. It's just what I have and what I always bake with, so I'm not fussed. Whew. Switch hands when your other hand gets tired. I'm gonna call that good. It also says to mix the eggs ahead of time and mash the bananas ahead of time. I'm gonna be using that in the same bowl and then adding it to our creamed butter and sugar. These eggs are from my chickens, of course. These particular eggs are from the chickens that live out back with the goats. They eat lots of bugs out in the field, so they're nice orange yolks, which is what I love to see. And then we're just scrambling them like eggs until it looks uniform. Don't need to be super perfect about it. Honestly, I feel like banana bread is one of the more forgiving baking things. Like if you're intimidated by baking, this is a good starter recipe. Don't be scared. Just make sure you are using overripe bananas. Regular ripe bananas aren't gonna have the same sweetness because I think it's like complex carbohydrates break down into sugars. One of those food science terms, you know. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the egg mixture to this bowl, using a spatula to get all of it out. And then I'm just gonna mash the bananas in the same bowl so we're not dirtying a bunch. I do have the oven going at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I believe it's 180 degrees Celsius. It says so in the recipe. Putting my banana peels in my compost bin. I thought about trying to make this video tomorrow and I was like, I don't know if the bananas are gonna make it another day. I think I need to record this video, even if it is getting dark. All right, I am using the same fork that I used to break up the egg. It's not a big deal. And I'm just gonna mash this. Again, we're kind of going for a mashed potato type of consistency. The recipe does say you can use 4 bananas for an extra flavorful, extra moist loaf. Honestly, if I had 4 bananas, I would probably do that, but I don't. I have 3 bananas, so where are you gonna use that? Okay, so we've got another bowl of what looks like mashed potatoes, but is actually bananas. We're gonna go ahead and get this mixed in at the same time as our eggs. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get this all mixed together until it's kind of a smooth consistency. And making sure any of those kind of larger lumps of bananas are getting incorporated in. If it's a little bit lumpy, it's not a big deal. I do like to use a rubber spatula to make sure I'm getting everything out, which is gonna give you more bread, but also be easier to clean your plates. I'm gonna use this to kind of smush against. This says to sift together flour, baking soda, and salt. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna mix it well. I sometimes will do that when I'm working with like a really particular recipe. I have not found banana bread to be that, so I'm not gonna. So we're gonna be adding 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Normally I would use a scale. If you own a scale, use 120 grams per cup is the conversion weight for flour. But I do want to show that you can use something else. The reason that I prefer to use scales for flour is because it tends to compact. So as a good rule, if you are measuring by volume with cups like this, you want to use one tool to scoop it and then put it into the container that you're measuring it in. That's gonna allow, it's gonna compact a little bit when we're scooping it, and then when we get it down in the container, it's gonna kind of fluff up. So that's gonna allow me to get a much more consistent measurement versus if I were to just use the cup measure, it would be actually more than a cup of flour and would be a little bit off the recipe. Most recipes are pretty forgiving and that's not a big deal, but when you're getting into like very specialized baking, it's good to just be in the habit of doing that. The real reason I always use a scale is because I hate dirtying this many dishes. If you use a scale, you can just pour it directly into your thing if you're feeling risky, or you can measure it out in a separate container, but you don't necessarily have to have like 3 different things that you're dirtying. All right, so that's 1 cup. I have my 1/2 cup measure. The handle broke off of it, but it still works, so I still have it. And then I'm just using the 1/4 cup measure to fill it up. I know normally people, you wear an apron when they're cooking. That could, like, I have aprons, but I don't know. It's like extra things around my body. It's sensory stuff. So I'm measuring out 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I'm using vanilla paste My vanilla is still extracting that I homemade, but I will be including that in an upcoming series about homemade Christmas presents. I'm planning on making my Christmas presents this year, so be sure to subscribe if you want some inspiration for homemaking Christmas gifts, or just having different things to make in general. If you like crafts, I'm going to be doing a little bit of crafting on the channel, which I've never done before. So it's going to be a fun winter while the garden is sleeping. We're going to keep busy, don't worry. Okay, so the recipe specifies not to overmix. That's usually a texture thing. It's usually trying to keep the texture a certain way. I'm trying not to overmix, but I do want it mixed. All right, perfection. So this is about how I want it to look. It is slightly lumpy, kind of like you would do like a pancake batter. You want it to have just a tiny bit of lumpiness. That's totally normal, totally good. So I'm just taking a stick of butter and running it along the bottom of my pan and the sides. This is like a fairly non-stick pan. It's actually stoneware, which develops natural non-stickness over time. However, I don't think it's as well seasoned as some of my own other stoneware. I'm still getting it to that point. So, and I also really enjoy doing this trick. Okay, so we've got butter all around the bottom and edges here, and I'm just gonna be putting a little bit of sugar. You can use flour for things like this when baking to kind of create a non-stick surface. With sweet dishes, I prefer to use sugar because it gives like a beautiful crunch on the bottom of the baked good. And I just love that. So you can see it's not totally coated, but there's a nice amount of sugar at the bottom of that. And that's going to allow us to get it out really easily, and it's gonna create a nice crispy crust at the bottom of this. It's gonna be so good. And then easy peasy lemon squeezy. We're just gonna pour it in here. Get it all out. One of these days I'm gonna learn to angle it towards the camera when I do this, but I'm right-handed, it's hard. Okay, set this to the side. I'm trying not to cover my kitchen in bananas and flour, but I'm not succeeding. Using my beloved rubber spatula to get all that batter in. We hate food waste here. So I'm just gonna scrape even the spoon to make sure we're getting all of that goodness in here, and to make for easier cleanup. And then just along this edge here, I made a mess and I want that to be able to rise. So I'm just pulling this back towards the inside, and then I'm wiping it off with a clean cloth to make sure, because these bits at the top will just become kind of like browned and burnt. You don't want that. This is going in the oven for 55 minutes, so I will see you in just a moment. All right, so our banana bread baked for about 55 minutes is looking nice and browned on top. Kind of thinking about burning along the edges, but I don't mind a nice dark banana bread, but I did make sure that it was cooked all the way through because it does take a while to cook this thick bread. So I'm going to use my knife and just make sure it's nice and loosened. It is cooled down enough that I can be touching it without any problem. See if it flips. Yeah, beautiful, nice and steamy. So with a yeasted bread, you need to wait for it to cool completely before you eat it, or you're gonna make it like a gummy texture. With a bread that has a chemical leavener, such as baking soda or baking powder, that's not always necessarily the case. We're gonna treat it more like a muffin. We're gonna eat it warm. All right, so in my experience, you shouldn't need a super sharp knife to cut banana bread. Although you can use one. I'm trying to use something that is dishwasher safe because I don't feel like doing dishes. All right, and then like a generous portion of butter, always. I feel like this is a serious matter of preference, but I love the edge pieces that are nice and crispy. But if you like the inside pieces that are really soft, that's valid too. Wow, that's good. I say it every time, but I seldom make bad food. It's nice and crispy. The parts that look burnt aren't. They taste fine. I think 5 more minutes probably would have been a little bit on the burnt side just along these edges. So good, so wholesome, so hearty. Absolutely perfect. And I think this is gonna be my breakfast tomorrow as well. So I'm excited to have some really easy breakfast because I suck at being a breakfast person. Well, I'm gonna get the rest of this cut up and brought over to my kids so that they can chill out and have a little bit of banana bread before bed. I will go ahead and include the playlist of all of my cooking recipes here at the end of the video if you wanna check out all of the stuff that we've made here in the kitchen. So I hope to see you all really, really soon. And in the meantime, treat yourself to something delicious. No, do not climb on the counter. No, not up, not up, not up, not going up.